Welcome to this session. Please have a quick look at the screen. I hope you're in the right place. Myself and Dan Davies from the Woodland Academy Trust, we're going to be talking about universal design for learning this afternoon. My name is Bob Usher. I oversee all of the teaching and learning aspects of LGfL, London Grid for Learning. We've got over 3,000 schools on our service. We provide broadband connectivity, cybersecurity, safeguarding, and all sorts of things on our network. I oversee all of that curriculum-based aspect, the learning. You know, the stuff that schools are actually, that's why we have them, yeah? That's what Dan and I are going to be talking about this afternoon. I won't say more about Dan, you're more than capable of introducing yourself. Let's get cracking, shall we? That was who I am. Who are you? We haven't got time this afternoon to do a personalised session, but I always quite like to know who's in the room. So who are you? Are you a Senko? Any Senkos here? Bit of a whoop there, excellent. Senior leadership, anyone in senior leadership? I know they can be the same, those two. Occupational health? Speech and language therapy? Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of you today. How about a bog standard teacher? Welcome. Other, how about that? Yeah, and we've got others as well. So, you know, normally we would do a bit more time on this, but obviously we've got a mix of people here. I just want to orientate you about value systems before we proceed. This is Dr. Fiona Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with Fiona's work, but she puts it really, really clearly. Here we go.
The digital divide is no longer just about access to devices and connectivity. It's now also about the choices that we all make in our roles supporting teaching and learning, either directly or indirectly. We all act as pedagogical gatekeepers through the decisions that we make in our everyday roles and activities.
Okay, so it's a really short clip of that, but the point is, it doesn't matter who you are, whatever your role is, the decisions that we make as teachers or as Senkos or external support, the decisions we make really, really impact on all of our learners, and we need to, of course, act with great responsibility. We talk about EdTech at LGfL and on the EdTech Hubs programme, which I lead with Ty Goddard from EdTech UK, and we're very, very clear. The role of technology is secondary compared to our, can't say it, but pedagogical intentions, okay? We need to think about the learner first. But it's supposed to be about UDL this afternoon, okay? So if we had more time, Belinda and I, my colleague on the front row, we would be doing one of those interactive things, Slidos, where you're on your device and it's coming up here and people say, well, yeah, I haven't got time for that. So, what is universal design for learning? When I started to first talk about universal design for learning, I often had blank faces. And so I realised that if I talked about removing barriers for learning, everyone went, oh, right, yeah, I quite agree, yeah, we must do that. So for us, this afternoon, it is about removing barriers to learning. That's what the focus is. I want you to meet someone called Lola. She was in year 6 when I made this film with her. This is, for me, in a nutshell, the impact of UDL.
Before the laptop, it was really hard to write, and no teachers could read my writing. It was one of the hardest things, knowing where my punctuation was, because they'd say, oh, Lola, you've missed out a comma, oh, Lola, you've missed out a capital letter, and I couldn't figure out where it was. But people would always ask me and say, what does that say? What does that say? And I couldn't even read it myself. And that's when the Win book came in. Oh. What did I spell wrong? Let's see. Easy enough. And that's when probably my whole Key Stage 2 life had just changed, when I figured out there was something called immersive reader, which is basically where you can hear the punctuation. Let's see what I get.
The scene is set at Dunsinane Castle, where their new king and queen have a great feast as Macbeth walks and loud chatter fills the room.
Oh, I see. I didn't have a comma in the right place. Where was that? Let's read that again from top. I can now spell. I now know where to put commas. Capital letters is just a piece of cake. I've got the Golden Book, which is a massive sparkly book which my head teacher keeps in her office. And if our teacher finds our work the best possible Year 6 standard it could be, then we go downstairs to her office and we talk to her about our work. She puts us in a gold book, she gives us a sticker, like mine, and we're represented in Friday's Achievement Assembly. In my SATs, when I got my results, I was happier than ever. And I wasn't quite sure at the start why I had done well and what had improved it. But then I started remembering it wasn't my book that helped me, it was my actual win book. Look what it's done for me. I have achieved many more goals because it's just easier.
Okay, so that's Lola. Very proud of Lola. But the questions, if we had more time, this is kind of discussed with the person next to you in your group and all that kind of stuff, but was it the win book that made the difference? I mean, immersive reader, that's free. Anyone can use that. And of course you've got to have a device to do that. But was it the win book that made the difference? Was it the technology that made the difference? And what was the role of the teacher in that? And if the teacher hadn't understood what immersive reader could do and the value of having a device in the class, Lola wouldn't have had any of those benefits. And at the start of that video, look at the barriers that Lola had just on a daily basis, just on the most basic access to the curriculum. So, where can we put this what's the framework where we can put the Lola experience here? I'm not going to go into detail here, but basically there's an organisation in America called CAST, and they've come up with the framework that's here. I'm not going to spend long on this, but just 3 core strands to UDL. Engagement, representation, and action and expression. So as teachers, how do we engage? So many times I hear people talk about the kids love using technology. Yeah? You could argue that fits into the engagement aspect. Representation. How do you represent the information or the concepts that you're teaching? How do you do that? So many decisions that you make as a teacher that affects that. And how do you allow your learners to express their understanding? That's the real bare bones basics of UDL. I just want to give you some examples. We've got a whole portfolio of open access learning resources on LGfL. What I'm about to show you, you can get yourself. Just to take space adventures, for example, we made this at LGfL. I'd watched a bit too much Iron Man, Interstellar and the Martian films. Basically, this resource, I commissioned an author. She wrote a space adventure, and it's a mission to the moon, and don't want to spoil it, but it goes wrong. Yeah? And there's all sorts of curriculum linked to it. And if we think about, well, what's the engagement aspect? May seem quite obvious, space, children, interesting for many. Virtual reality, there's an audio book that goes with it. All of the stories told to a talking head, like Iron Man, the Martian, that kind of thing. Representation, there is overlap with engagement. But it's not just about having an audio book or a transcript of the video, an easy read text version, symbolised version of the story. This is how do we represent information, subtitles, and we did all of this before AI. I mean, that ability now, using AI to simplify text, for example, it's amazing. But this is all about how do we help the children engage with the material, and then it's up to you, of course, as to how you let them express their understanding. But let's just move on with some other examples. I'm sorry we're going at a pace this afternoon. Right, have a look at that. That's the Discovery Education Sandbox Augmented Reality app. That is free, works on iPads. Just have a look. That's a photograph of just someone pointing that iPad down the corridor. Real life here. Hang on, there's an animated, I know it's a still photo, but that is animated, that polar bear that's waiting at the end of the corridor for you. And how about that, the stimulation? So is that engagement? Is that representation? What action and expression can you get from that? How about that? Same platform. Can you go to your head teacher, I'd like to bring a giraffe into the school hall this afternoon, I'm teaching maths. We can't do that. Yes, you can. Look. And look at what you can do there.
So actually, if you've got a giraffe in the classroom and you've placed that in and it's filling up your 3.5, 4 metres of ceiling space, what can you then do with that if you relate that to children and you stand a child next to that? So we began to realise that just by doing a simple thing like taking a screenshot of a child standing next to a giraffe, you could really explore the mathematical possibilities of ratio and proportion. You could really begin to set up mathematical questions when you lay children down against the length of a shark, and begin to think about even just setting up simple mathematical arrays where you line up simple objects so children can learn their times tables in an innovative way. But again, when you let children lead the learning, you get something completely different.
Okay, and we could go on with that. Definitely engaging, yes? Yeah. Okay, look, representation. Have a look at Poppy. I think Poppy was in year 1. Have a look at the virtual flower pick she does on Red Riding Hood.
I'm on the way to my grandma's house, and I see some lovely flowers. I'm gonna pick.
There we go. Virtual flowers now being held. Why did she get scared? It's Red Riding Hood, big bad wolf. Did you spot the blue donkey? Yeah? She didn't care that it was a blue donkey, but because it represented the story enough. So engagement, representation, and then action and expression. Actually, Belinda and I have done loads of work with schools where the children are building these immersive environments at a very young age. How about that for action and expression? My final example before I hand over to Dan, one of the hardest working tins of green paint. Look at that. Just paint a wall green. You have got a ready-made studio there for you. And how about this? For a teacher's use of video augmented reality and how it engages, represents and allows the children to achieve their potential.
So we use the Sandbox app to create, well, 2 things really. We were focusing on the impact of the Blitz and the humanitarian impact of the Blitz, and the children wrote kind of dialogue conversations between 2 characters. And we created like a bombed out scene behind them, and I asked the children to specifically show their historical understanding in what they've written. So even though it might have looked like a bit of kind of drama dialogue, it was actually what I'd asked for was that historical understanding. So that's how I kind of scaffolded it, and then in pairs they created it, and then we filmed it. And it showed their level of understanding from that historical point of view. They really enjoyed doing it, and it was full engagement from everybody, regardless of ability. So I have a child in my class who is selective mute, and she wrote the dialogue with a partner, and I enabled her to practice this in another room because she will speak in front of her peers, just not in front of adults. And then again, she allowed a third child to record the dialogue going on. So she was fully participating, and it was actually the first time that I'd heard her voice.
What time was it when you woke up?
I can't really remember, but I knew it was starting to get dark.
Did you manage to get home safely?
I did manage to get my home safe with only 3 minor injuries on my arm.
It facilitated me being able to hear her speak for the first time, so she'd had to learn the script off by heart. She'd also had to interact with another peer by speaking. Had the technology not been there, it would have just stayed in written form. She wouldn't have been able to have produced that piece of work, and certainly it wouldn't have had the same impact at all. So without the use of technology, she wouldn't have been able to take part in the lesson in the same way as everyone else.
Engaging, representation of the concepts and the content on the curriculum, and then the ultimate in expression on a child that finds it very, very difficult in a normal classroom situation and yet achieved alongside all of her peers. On that note, after that rather quick gallop through, I'm going to hand over to Dan, who is going to take us through the next stage. Thanks, Dan.
There we go, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Davies from the Woodland Academy Trust. Woodland Academy Trust is made up of 5 primary schools, and all of our primary schools are 1-to-1 iPad from year 1 up. And a couple of years ago, we discovered UDL and we came across it as a concept. We thought this is really where we want to go with it. And I've just seen such wonderful, wonderful things come from it. Now, when we talk about universal design for learning, I always start every session with these 2 key messages. The most dangerous phrase in education is because that's the way we've always done it. Really want to keep that in mind throughout today. And what are we doing for students that they could already be doing for themselves? And a big part of universal design for learning is not about finding ways to add on inclusive practices. It's about removing the existing exclusionary ones in the first place. So where do we start? Where are we now? And what are our current priorities? Just whizzing through. Universal design for learning is not about technology. Technology makes it possible. It makes us able to open that door. For so many years, we've seen classrooms where there's been a kind of general task that we've made a bit simpler or added something on different for this group that we've pre-assigned. Then we've done something that's a bit more challenging to keep those what we might have called higher, or any of those other horrible phrases for different times to keep them going. Universal design for learning is about getting one learning opportunity, designing one task really, really well, that every child can access it at the exact right point for them in that moment, in that actual lesson, not in a pre-assigned group, not in something based on what they've done yesterday or the day before. Flexible, accommodating and proactive, and never leaving anyone behind. It's a big, big mind change in the way that you think about what learning looks like in a classroom. And this is explains universal design for learning beautifully, because universal design is an architectural term originally, with accessibility law about saying all new buildings must have a ramp so that wheelchair users can access. And then they kind of went, hang on a minute, why do I need the stairs then? Because everybody can use the ramp. So I'm not adding something on, I'm designing one thing really, really well. And I think you can all agree that in every classroom in the world, there is one thing that is going to be guaranteed, and that is variability. It's not something that we're trying to fix, it's something that we need to accept and develop our practice to meet that. That is what we're going to have. We will have variability. It's to be expected, it's not to be fixed. So here is the framework that Bob mentioned in a little bit more detail. Now, over the summer last year, this was updated, so this is 3.0. And it had been sitting at version 2.2 for a very, very long time, and this is the updated that we want to focus on. And it's some of the key things that have come into the new updated framework are very much about agency. The previous framework was very much about directed in kind of educator language, focused on the instruction as opposed to being learner-centric, and really focusing on the organisation as a whole. And thinking about systemic bias and unconscious bias, particularly with artificial intelligence and everything else that's coming in. And again, that representation of themselves. We know the importance of students being able to recognise and see themselves represented in the community has a huge effect on learners from the youngest of ages. And that's a big part of universal design for learning and its approach. Now, it's not a tick list. And if you're using it as a tick list, you're using it wrong. You need to understand what you're already doing as an organisation, what you want to get out of it, where you want to go forward, and develop a shared language around it to see what does it actually mean to us. So the way we started is we started looking at these in individual areas, for example, just taking that middle box there and thinking about, there you go, language and symbols, clarifying vocabulary. What do we already do really well? You start to think about dual coding. You start to think about other ways that you widget symbols and things like that. There's already this stuff going on. How do we make it develop into part of our practice as a whole team? How do we build up on that so that we've got a real shared understanding? And take the time to really, really build that so that universal design for learning means the same thing to everybody within that organisation. So we literally, staff room, training room, wherever it might be, huge display, just made up in this blank way, post-it notes, adding up, writing things on, finding out what goes well. Keep it simple. racing through this as well. Accessibility features we know are huge. They're on every single device. All smart devices have a We Are iPad. And we started originally putting voice notes for children, teachers leaving voice notes so that children could listen to them. And we realised that we were de-skilling them, what we're doing for children that they can already be doing for themselves. Even with handwritten text, wherever it may be, if the children are taught to take a photograph of it, they can scan that, they can then translate it, they can make it read aloud, they can change fonts, things that it's written on, they can do all that themselves if they're taught how to do it. We teach children how to turn pages in books, how to hold pencils, teach them how to use the technology to support themselves. That ownership, that agency. And the difference then is they can take that out into the real world. That barrier's been removed for the rest of their lives, as opposed to not just in the classroom when the teacher stood next to them. Real development of agency and independence and ownership. Oh, the tree. I talk about the tree all the time. This, we've all seen worksheets like this. Makes no sense. No tree in the world looks like that. No tree in the world looks like that. Do I genuinely know if a child fills that out correctly, what a child knows about the parts of a tree? No. But if I say, right, go outside, onto your school field, take a photograph of a tree, you can leave a voice note on it, you can label it up, you can handwrite it, you can doodle it, you can put a text box on it, tell me what you know about a tree. I'm going to know then, aren't I? I'm really going to start to some of those conversations. Hang on a minute, we've taken a photograph of the same tree, but the leaves are a bit different on your side of the tree versus mine. Why might that be? Your leaves are pointed, they're random. Much more work for the teacher, much easier. PPA session, oh I know, I'll send them out to take a photo of a tree. Great, teacher workload, that's really supporting as well. Whose resource is that? Who's made that? The children. How many resources have I now got in the room? Potentially 30. And that real world context, so I know where that tree is. Now I want to talk to you really quickly about emojis. I'm just going to skip through this. This is a board with some boxes and some question marks in. Double tap that question mark, your emojis pop up, you can put your emojis in. Super simple for children to use, next to no time for a teacher to make. Once you've done it once, and I normally ask you to think about some things that you could use this for. Here are just a few of the things that I came up with that simple design could be used for. Sequencing a story, states of water cycle, my weekend, whatever that might be. And if you'd have said to me 3 years ago I was going to be standing in front of a room of educators talking about emojis, I'd have looked at you all silly. I think we all think of a big round yellow face that's quite not very serious, not very academic. But what is the power of emoji? What is the difference in the children choosing those things themselves? They're theirs. It's linked to what they were thinking in the sequence of something. But also talking about representation, emojis, I can change the skin tone, change the flesh tones. I've got differently abled represented within those emojis. I've got different family types. And especially if I'm talking to you about my story or my news, my weekend. Really powerful to use the emoji. I promise. And just to finish, to say that the way that we learn is as unique as our fingertips. So just change that mindset of not adding on inclusion practice, removing the existing exclusionary and see what we can really do there. I'm happy to talk to UDL about UDL to anybody, so I'm around, please come and chat to me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. We're very short of time, and it was only ever going to be a whistle-stop tour, but there are some follow-up resources and opportunities for you all if you have found this of interest. So the first one is Belinda and I have worked on a new resource which we published in January, which actually features you rather a lot, Dan, but others as well on Universal Design for Learning. We've deconstructed it for you and the UK audience. There's lots of video content of the sort that I've been showing to model what we've been talking about. That is available, open access for everyone. If you're an LGfL school, and if you're in a London school, 94% of schools are LGfL schools. There's also platforms such as J2E and Busy Things. Bradley, who's on the desk, the stand, what are we calling it this afternoon? The LGfL stand can take you through those amazing platforms, which are fantastic for UDL. But there's some other things as well. We've got a whole training program completely free. Go to as many as you want. Dan's whole trust is fantastic with their use of iPad, and you can go and visit Woodland Academy schools in the school day and go into the classrooms and see it all in action. Thank you again, Dan, for making that possible. There we go. There are our digital discovery days, EdTech study tours. What else? Well, we've got the EdTech Hubs programme, and it isn't just the Woodland Academy Trust. There are opportunities for you to go and visit lead schools on the programme that are in different parts of London and beyond. We have the East of England Conference on the 25th of June. That is in Bury St Edmunds. I appreciate that's not very close to here, but that's the regional nature of the programme. We've also got London EdTech Hubs at Cheam Common Academy in Sutton. Again, not that close to here, but that's just geography for you. What's the next slide? Yeah, EdTech Hubs. We're about building communities of practice. Dan's input this afternoon is an example of contribution from different aspects. People on the programme, we've got events that are local, regional and national. We offer support in schools. I can come in and see you in schools. Belinda can come and see you as well. And you see the kind of quality of video content that we've got that is capturing that impactful practice. What else? Yeah, just go to the EdTech Hubs portal. There's just so much material there. Got a new, I haven't put it on here, there's a new section called Why EdTech? Can't believe I'm having to even ask that question in 2025, but many people need that mentioning their names. Ofsted, curriculum review, why EdTech? Seriously. We've got EdTech Hubs TV, there's Taikola from EdTech UK. We cover all the latest issues happening in the sector on that. And just to end, core principles of teachers' role. Might be a bit trite, but it's true. We're all teachers of SEND. There's that aspect of gatekeepers. Whatever your response to what we've talked about this afternoon, you're making decisions, aren't you? When you go back into school, the decisions. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it interesting? Do you want to train the ideas out? Do you not? They're all decisions that affect, ultimately, your learners. Technology doesn't solve all the problems, it's the quality of you as teachers that's key on this. So, connect with your learners, present so they can understand, and what opportunities do you really give for them to show what they know? And I think of that child, the child that found it difficult to talk in class. What opportunities, what decisions did that teacher make that allowed that child to achieve her full potential? We've got a podcast channel that Belinda and I do called The Included Conversation. Dan, I believe you're appearing in the next episode of that. And sign up for newsletters. It's all there, everyone. I hope that has been useful to you this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming along. We're sticking around if you want to have a chat. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Dan.